Hello students, welcome to the Analyst, dated 29th of September 2023. Today we look at 5 important articles from the Indian Express and the Hindu. The first article will be regarding the Green Revolution. Then we'll move on to Evergreen Revolution, where Evergreen Revolution will be a solution to the issues that we face in Green Revolution. Then we'll look at private equity, we'll look at privileges committee, and finally we'll look at host of evacuation operations, which can be extremely relevant for your prelims. Now let's start with the first article, and this pertains to your GS3 agriculture. Now what is the context? The architect of India's Green Revolution has departed, and he is Dr. M.S. Swaminathan. Now what is Green Revolution? Usually whenever we go for any growth or progress, we usually go in a stepwise manner, and whenever we go in a stepwise manner, we usually are evolving. So it is called evolution whenever there is some gargantuan change. So that is your revolution. So Green Revolution refers to the tectonic shift or tectonic improvement in agriculture since the 1960s, right? Now, Green Revolution comes in various perspectives. So if we look at the international perspective of Green Revolution, it was essentially permeating from the developed world towards the developing countries. And when we say developed, we mean to say US and moving towards Mexico. Now what was the idea? The idea was that with increase in inputs, we can get more outputs. So let's say there is 10% increase in inputs, so I can get 10% increase in outputs. So simply it was a input-output ratio. Now this was extremely successful in Mexico in the 1960s. Now simultaneously there was a host of issues that was going on back in India, and let's look at the backdrop. So we stared at famines and lack of food, food scarcity, famines. That was a common proposition in pre-independent India. Then we saw back-to-back droughts during the 1960s, and simultaneously we were looking at two successive wars. One was the Indo-China and then Indo-Pak war. And naturally, because we were consolidating our borders and a lot of people were moving to and fro, so migration, refugees, that was a normal cause of concern. And India was dependent on something called as PL 480, where we got 10 million ton of wheat from US and Mexico. And mind you, we did not have the money to pay for these shipments. So some of this was in form of aid. So we were in a condition which was infamously called as ship to mouth. That means we are hungry to our bellies, and we will only be fulfilled once the ship docks in India. And the ship is moving from west towards India. Now please look at the perspective that this was the time that India was advocating for non-alignment movement also, and advocating for independent parties irrespective of the two poles. Now let's appreciate that a country who is not able to feed itself and is going for global leadership. So somehow this lack of food security, it became a blot on India. And India was moving around the world with a begging bowl for food. And therefore, something needs to be changed. And it must not be an evolution, it must be a revolution. Some form of tectonic shift. Our Prime Minister, ex-Prime Minister, Lal Bahadur Shastri, he even asked to skip a meal. And parallelly, we must understand that as we got independence, we were witnessing a lot of health improvements. And we can call this as health transition. Now, as this health transition was happening, naturally demographic transition would also happen. Why? Because we were at high birth rate and high death rate pre-independence. But as health outcomes are increasing, they are improved. Why? Because we have a democratic governance now. So what will happen? The birth rate will remain high, but the death rate will slowly decline. And so naturally, there will be explosion in population. And whenever there is explosion in population caused due to health improvement, what will happen? Let's say this is the supply and this will be the demand. So demand will always outstrip the supply. So naturally, it will lead to food scarcity and food crisis. And this population explosion was more so visible in the plains of India. Because these plains of India, the northern plains, the Indo-Gangetic plains, the Brahmaputra plains, these plains have very high carrying capacity. So we had to come out with a solution. So now the strategy was that we put in more input. Let's put in more money. Let's put in more inputs, multiple types of inputs, or even increase the volume of inputs and to get more output. Now, what kind of inputs are we talking about? So let's say earlier I was dependent on the rain, or I was dependent on southwest monsoon. So that means somehow I am dependent on the vagaries of nature. Let's replace this. Let's replace this with assured irrigation. So I am going for irrigation. What type of irrigation are we talking about? We are talking about canal irrigation. So under the Command Area Development Program, canal irrigation was promoted, and regions were selected where canals were already there or canal making was easy. So please appreciate something, that we are going for a distorted model. Let's say I have 100 rupees and I have 5 children to feed, and each of the children will require 100 rupees. So I can feed only one children at a time. So one child at a time. So what I'll do, I'll go for a distorted model. So that means, given the lack of resources and the emergent nature of food crisis, we had to go for a distorted model, and we went for a distorted model whereby we were choosing regions which already had canals or where it was easy to build canals. So we replaced rain, southwest monsoon with assured irrigation. Then we were using a lot of cow dung. Now it was very difficult to go for NPK fertilizers. So we went for simply nitrogen or urea, and we got more outputs from this urea. Now one backdrop of, or one outcome of this urea distortion can be visible even today, where we have ratios of, let's say, 12:4:1 or 8:3:1 instead of 4:2:1, and we are talking about the NPK ratios. So this distortion has some historical component also. Then what else? One of the most important input is seeds. So when we are talking about seeds, these were usually stored seeds or exchanged seeds. So let's say I am a farmer and I have saved a lot of seeds. So to help my fellow villagemen, I will give my seeds to everyone so that they can also crop. This is form of a fraternity that we have in the farming community. Now, what was the issue? That the productivity in such stored seeds is extremely low, and we wanted to improve the productivity. We wanted to get more out of our lands. So seeds were imported from Mexico, and these seeds were of dwarf varieties and early maturing. That means essentially I cannot give you too much of time to grow, and you will produce more. That means, let's say this is the crop and this is the final outcome. So earlier I used to have crops which are extremely tall, which are sucking out more nutrients from the soil. They are taking more time to grow, and they are giving, let's say, smaller output. On the other hand, let's say if I have a smaller plant and I'm getting larger outputs. So these are dwarf varieties and they were imported directly from Mexico. And you can remember these names, they can serve as good fodder points. Sorona 64 and Lerma Roja. And they were Indianized with the name of Sonalika and Kalyan Sona. Now these were the seeds and these were dwarf varieties. And what kind of seeds are these? These are not GM seeds. These are simply hybrid seeds. So by crossbreeding different varieties of, let's say, wheat, we are creating hybrid wheat seeds. So nitrogen done through urea, irrigation done, seed done, then going for more pesticide and going for mechanization. Now at this juncture, we must appreciate that mechanization and irrigation tells us that we are going for areas where the per capita land is at a higher scale, and we cannot go in areas where, let's say, there is multiple dissections in the farm or in regions where there is extreme amount of slope variability. That simply means I cannot move to states like Himachal Pradesh, I cannot go to Bihar, I cannot go to eastern Uttar Pradesh. Why? Because the size of land holdings will be small and Himachal Pradesh will have slope. So naturally it is not conducive for my mechanized form of farming, which I have learned from the grasslands of US and Mexico. So I want large scale commercial farming where I can have estates, large estates, where I can use these machines, I can use the pesticides, I can go for these chemical oriented farming and use the irrigation through canal, or I can go for pumps. So another strategy was going for pump. So pump requires two things. A, you require a pump set and you require electricity. What if the government, the state government, it provides subsidy for both? Naturally, it is an incentive to move towards more and more cropping using these patterns. Now, what are the areas? So, in area, we went for distortion. We were going for Western Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, Haryana. And in the first phase, this is the heartland of wheat. So this is the first phase of wheat revolution undertaken under Green Revolution. In the second aspect, what will happen? Let's say this is the core area. In the second aspect, gradually this core area will move. And in the third phase, it will gradually move to all of India. So spatial movement happened very gradually. Second aspect was rice. So distortion in terms of wheat and rice also. So few crops were selected, few regions were selected, a typical type of farming was selected, and then it was heavily subsidized and heavily incentivized so that there can be a revolution in terms of attaining food security. And whenever we are talking about food security, with the premise of food security, we are essentially talking about the calorific nature. The calorie intake. That means, let's say all of us are starving and we are getting only 1000 calories. So first I want my calories. So I am going for a distortion of 2000 calorie. And what better way to get my calories than to get cereals? So please appreciate these points that we are going for region distortion. Regionally we have distorted, right? Then we have chosen cereals. In the cereals, we have distorted with rice and wheat. What else? We have only chosen large scale or large farms. And we have only chosen chemical inputs to agriculture. We are not talking about gobar. We are not talking about organic fertilizers. So, ecological fertilizer sustainability was completely compromised in the name of food security. And naturally, whenever we are going for any such distortions, it will lead to a lot of issues also. Now, let's first discuss what are the positive impacts. So, in a nutshell, we can say that not only the total production, but if we take individually, let's say wheat, rice, and exports. And this is how you can use data to show what is the trend analysis or what is the final impact of Green Revolution. And especially if you are discussing the positive impacts, that there was an exponential rise in the total production, there was an exponential rise in the wheat, rice production as well as exports. So from begging bowl to bread basket, from begging bowl to wheat exporter, from ship to mouth to exporter, and having a food surplus, food storage, buffer stock, and being someone who aids countries like Afghanistan, LDC countries, wherever there is conflict, India is donating some amount of grains. So it is a huge amount of success, not only in terms of food security, but also in terms of boosting India's own credibility at the global stage. Now, looking at wheat, so from 6 million ton to 106 million ton. Look at the multiples that we have gone. We have not gone for 10% increase. We have gone almost 20 times. So that is the impact. Then from 35 million ton to 118 million ton. Then total, we are moving from 51. So we can plot this here like 51 to currently approximately 300 million tons. So we have gone 6x in the last almost 70 years. And that is the success of Green Revolution. Then in the last 3 years alone, we exported more than 85 million tons of cereals. And we have recently seen that during the Russia-Ukraine crisis, India was time and again limiting exports of, let's say, rice, wheat. Why? Because there is propensity now to export all these cereals, and these are essentially today water exports. Also, if they're exported in huge numbers, because there is demand, so naturally they'll be exported. But if they are exported in huge demand, then what happens? Usually we suffer from inflation domestically. Then we went for poverty alleviation, rural development. Why? Because whenever we are talking about rural India, so rural India is agrarian, and we also know that poverty incidence in rural areas is high. So if I am improving agriculture, which is the mainstay of economy, and indirectly, directly 70% of India is linked to agriculture, and now with more integration with services and industry, and a single family having multiple incomes and mixed incomes, where at least 2 of the family members are getting some amount of money, some amount of earning from agriculture, it is naturally pertinent for not only individuals, for not only government, but also for private sector, that India's agricultural sector grows and it multiplies, and there is doubling of farmer income, there is increase in value addition, there is increase in exports. That is but natural for all the stakeholders in India's growth. Now, let's look at the issues. So, when we are looking at the distorted models, naturally these distorted models will be seen in time and space, and spatial distortions were created in forms of disparity. And best example is, let's say I want to find a APMC mandi in Punjab. I will find it in a radii of 5 kilometers. And if I am in Assam, so I will take 35 kilometers to find one APMC mandi. So that is the level of distortion. And why do you think the such distortion has happened? Is Government of India somehow promoting Punjab and not promoting Assam? That is not the idea. Then it is because of the supply chain of subsidies. So what happens is, let's say I give you first power. So power subsidy is given to you. Now, can I withdraw it? Absolutely not. And over the period of time, this power subsidy will keep on increasing. Then I am giving you pump subsidy. You buy pumps and you pump out your own water. So again, then I am giving you subsidy in urea, in seeds. But all these subsidies is going to areas which are more progressed, which have progressed more during Green Revolution. Why? Why? Because the subsidy is allocated to all the states, it is allocated to all of India. But why? There is distortion in terms of distribution because of supply chain effects. So, it is a simple game of inertia. Let's say there are two students. One of these students is studying every day for 12 hours. So, naturally, that person will have a higher inertia and that person will have higher supply chain for absorption of knowledge or information. On the other hand, let's say I started preparing today and I only am able to give 2 hours. So, naturally, it will take more time for me to absorb all of that. So, what has happened? That this distortion which started in 1960s, over the period of time, what has happened? It has created divides between the states which went for Green Revolution and the states which were bypassed by Green Revolution. So what do we see? That the farmers in the Green Revolution belt, they are more prosperous. Simultaneously with prosperity, they are also more politically empowered. And their voices are heard. They are more organized. On the other hand, the regions which bypassed Green Revolution, they continue to be the regions where there is high incidence of poverty and agrarian and rural distress. And these are also the regions which are still rain fed and regions where there is ample of farmer suicides. These are also the regions where farmers are quitting agriculture and they are moving out of agriculture, or they are asking their successive generations to not remain in agriculture. So that's a sorry story of distortion, and that is the economic perspective which is visible in space. Now let's look at other aspects. So monocropping, monoculture. So what are we doing? We are essentially simplifying ecosystem. And we are playing God by simplification of ecosystems. So we have cleared the lands. Why? To increase more and more land into arable area. We are bringing more land under agriculture. Now we have saturated the amount of land. Now what we are doing? We are exhausting the land, exhausting the soil by going for monocropping, monoculture. So a set of 2 to 3 crops we are going time and again, year after year. So what will happen? Eventually this will lead to soil exhaustion and it will lead to macro and micronutrient deficiency in the soil, systemic deficiencies in different regions. Simultaneously, if we think, let's say I am applying urea in all types of soil, in all weathers and in all regions. Are we having uniform soil all across India? No, we have different type of soil. So black cotton soil, and that black cotton soil within a district will vary from the black cotton soil of the other district, from the other division. Similarly, the black cotton soil of one district will vary from the alluvial soil that is present, let's say, in the Mithila plains of Bihar. So when we have different regions, when we have different kind of conditions, and we have different kind of atmospheric conditions also, different sizes of land holdings also, how can we have one size fits all approach? So the Green Revolution naturally created these distortion by simplifying the complex ecosystems, complex realities. Now, why did we go for it? That is because that was the need of the hour. So we cannot go for criticism of Green Revolution. Why? Because it solved the immediate problem. But simultaneously there are impacts, and therefore whenever there are impacts, we have to look at the positive solutions or the way forward where we can move towards. Now, whenever we are looking about groundwater, water quality, what do we see? That there is more and more eutrophication because more and more runoff from the soil is going into rivers, into rivulets. A lot of rivulets are then supporting alien species. Why? Because they are getting excessively enriched. Once there is excessive enrichment, naturally invasive alien species, they will take up the lakes, they will take up the rivulets, and they will be gone, they will be extinct, or they will become like nalas, and local solid liquid waste will start being dumped in these lakes and rivulets. And naturally over the period of time, because water is connected, so as a connected system, what will happen? This eutrophication will finally leach into soil, and finally it will leach into our fruits and veggies and will lead to bioaccumulation and biomagnification. Now, with water quality, we are looking at so many things. What about groundwater? Naturally, we can say that if I give you free electricity and you can pump your own water and you can afford going for a drilling, you can afford creating the setup for groundwater extraction, then can I safely say that unless I am going simultaneously for rainwater harvesting, unless I am recharging my groundwater pits, naturally there will be a decline in water table, and this has happened. And I have also improved, or I have also increased the chemical proportions of soil. So that has led to soil quality degradation, soil exhaustion, soil fatigue, as well as desertification. In regions we are now getting more aridosols or arid soils. Soil which is not even able to support, let's say, grass. Why? Because they have been monocropped year after year without going for fallowing, without going for crop rotation. Very simple ecosystem of wheat, rice, sugarcane. So soil will be exhausted. Then cancer villages, and this is an example that we can take. This is because of the excessive leaching of chemicals into soil, into water, as well as in form of pollution, air pollution. So all of these are flow systems, and they will finally reach us as humans, and they tend to affect more when you are vulnerable. For example, the elderly, the people suffering with comorbidities, the people who are pregnant, the women who are pregnant, and the children, the infants, they are affected more by these flow systems. So if we are living in an area where soil is polluted, where air is polluted, water is polluted, so naturally there will be effects in terms of increasing toxicity in our human bodies. Then simultaneously, what are we looking at? That the cost of agriculture is also going up. Why? Because now private sector is also involved. So the seed which used to cost 1 rupee can now very well cost 400 rupee a packet. So the immense amount of escalation in cost in terms of inputs, increasing cost. Simultaneously, there is declining incomes and declining outputs. Why? Because I have to fragment my land between all my siblings. So land fragmentation is there, and over the period of time, I am not able to afford this increased input cost of chemical agriculture. So I am not able to afford, let's say, the pesticide this year. And next year, I am not able to afford, let's say, the PK fertilizers. Even if I got free soil health card. So what will happen? Eventually, there will be decline in output. And now let's say, earlier, to get the same produce, I used to spend 4,000 rupees. Today, I am spending 24,000 rupees. That simply means either I should be able to afford the input to agriculture to get the same output, or I would compromise on the output itself. And that is happening. And that is why people are asking their children to move out of agriculture in regions where we are facing such issues. Let's look at the second discussion, and this also pertains to your GS3 agriculture. Here we look at Evergreen Revolution, and what is the need of Evergreen Revolution is nothing but the issues or the challenges that we face with Green Revolution, and whatever little case studies we have seen over the period of time that are coming from Green Revolution core regions. And this warning came from none other than Dr. M.S. Swaminathan himself. He said that Punjab is overdoing and Haryana is overdoing the Green Revolution. And now we have to move towards sustainable Green Revolution. Now multiple names we will hear multiple times. We'll read about, let's say, sustainable revolution. We'll read about Evergreen Revolution. We'll read about bringing green revolution to Eastern India. Then Rainbow Revolution. The moot point behind all such a revolution is to look at Green Revolution as a success story, and simultaneously to look at the fallacies, to look at the challenges, and to create such strategy of agricultural development so that we are not again getting complicated, we are not again trapped in the same issues. So whenever we are talking about Evergreen Revolution, the idea is very simple, that now my land will be constant. So I cannot do much with the size of land. So now I have to get more from that land. So I have to improve my productivity. That is for sure. First point is productivity. But that productivity should not be at the expense of environment. That means at the same time, I want environmental sustainability. I cannot harm the environment. Why? Because we have seen the long-term impacts, environmental impacts of Green Revolution. So the wisdom is more from less. And where can we see such phrases? We see such phrases today in all government policies when it comes to agriculture. Good example. Per drop, more crop. This comes from Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. So, using the same water, I want to irrigate more lands. So, the wisdom today is resource use efficiency. First, then I have to go for agricultural productivity. Increase. Third, I have to also increase the farming incomes. Then I have to move towards diversifying my incomes. Why? Because let's say I have 5 sources of incomes, and one of those sources is, let's say, a cereal. Let's say it's rice, and that rice is dependent on monsoon, and we have ENSO operating. So if there is El Nino, I will have deficit monsoon and maybe my crop might be affected. So that should not affect my other 4 incomes. So some form of hedging for the farmers, so that this agriculture distress, which eventually leads to a loan entrapment and then finally to agriculture suicides, and this whole cycle where farming is becoming non-remunerative, that should end. So parallelly, we have to also look at going for environmental sustainability. Why? Because even if I double farmer income for next 5 years, but eventually what happens? My quality of land degrades, and with the quality of land degradation, I will not be able to earn that much with the same amount of inputs in future. So environmental sustainability is must, and we must also look at the backdrop of issues like sea level rise, climate change, global warming, extreme climate events. So all these things are naturally also affecting agriculture. Why? Because one of the input of agriculture is solar insolation. The other input is monsoon. Now, if the solar insolation in some form is changing, if the patterns of weather is changing, if the climatic patterns themselves are changing, there is more heating, there is more cooling, there is extreme climate event, there is more flooding. So naturally, the agricultural systems will also be affected. So if one system of climate is getting affected, which is an input to agriculture, naturally the agriculture systems will also be affected. And therefore, we need to hedge and we need to create more resilience in agriculture by making it more sustainable. And when we are talking about sustainability, it must be made that we are talking about ecological sustainability. Now, so what will be the strategy going forward? So region-based strategy. So look out for regions. Find regions, locate their strength, locate their weaknesses, and then go for region-based strategies. And no one-size-fits-all approach. Given that we were in some form of food scarcity, so we went for a distorted strategy. Now we have to plan better. We have to go towards each region. We have to look at the soil. We have to look at what are the inherent benefits. What kind of agroecological regionalization we can go for. Agroclimatic regionalization we can go for. What should be the crop choices and what should be the seasons in which we crop. Where should we sell these products? How much should be the value addition? Are we going for agro processing? Are we going for only farming? Are we going for farming plus other mixed incomes? Are we going for cropping or are we going for agroforestry? Are we going for cropping or are we going for livestock also? So that whole mix of agriculture will come out, and that will come out only if we look at region. Because let's say I am in an area where the farmlands are small, but the farmer household, they have 2 to 3 cattle. So can I simultaneously, while supporting the farming, can I also simultaneously work on milk cooperatives? Just replicating the Sudha dairy, Amul dairy. So all those case studies can we replicate in a smaller scale and go for doubling farmer incomes? Or let's say I am going for any agricultural produce which I can sell at 10 rupees. But if I value add, it can be sold at as high as 400 rupees. Let's say I am converting my tomatoes into tomato puree. So am I improving the shelf life? Am I improving the value addition? Am I getting more for my money? Then where am I selling? Am I selling wheat to my APMC? Or I am selling the wheat to ITC, who is going for making biscuits from the same wheat? Am I selling my potatoes in market or I am selling it to Lace through contractual farming? So all those choices have to be made, and therefore to each their own, and therefore region-based strategies, localized, decentralized strategies. And whenever we are talking about these grand strategies of irrigation, using canal, using command area development program, what do we see? Today our strategy is going for precision irrigation. And how are we going for precision irrigation? Using drips, applying the Israeli model. But how will I get the water? So I am going for storage. Now storage cannot be central storage, it has to be local storage. That means maybe I am saving it in a tank or a pond somewhere. Then I am using a pump to bring it to the drip. What else? Can I also go for rainwater harvesting? Now rainwater harvesting is again not a central model, it is a decentralized model. So in irrigation we are moving towards a decentralized model. We are going for more resource use efficiency, water use efficiency, per drop more crop. We are going for region-based strategies. We are going for agroclimatic and agroecological regionalization. So crops which are suiting the climate as well as the ecology. We are not going against ecology or the region itself. Then going for soil quality based inputs. Without observation of soil health card, we are not going for use of fertilizer. So scientific use of fertilizer. Then simultaneously we are creating an agricultural mix. So some farmers will be going for, let's say, precision farming. Some are going for chemical farming. Some are going for organic farming. Some are going for zero budget natural farming. Some are going for mixed farming. Some are going for integrated farming. So we are creating a healthy mix of different types of farming, rather than creating a one-size-fits-all approach, which happened in Sri Lanka when it went all organic and created an economic crisis. Then we have to also move from the traditional rice-wheat system, which has been created by the subsidy supply chain created during Green Revolution. So we ignored some crops, we went into rice, wheat. Now we have to move into pulses. oilseeds. What else? Fruits, veggies. And parallelly, if we are looking at non-cropping options, we also have to move into animal husbandry and allied activities. So a single farmer household will have multiple sources of incomes. Then having integrated farming. For example, let's say I am going for cropping in Bihar. This is my rice field and this is my fish field. Alternatively, in Bengal, what I can have? I can fish and rice in the same field, integrated, and there is use of circular economy. Once output becomes others input. Then we are going for crop and non-crop, food crop and non-crop options. Then we are using the same farmland to go for forestry in form of agroforestry. Then we are taking up crops. We are taking up cash crops also. What else? We are diversifying into energy. How come? Either through biofuels or by setting up some solar panels. So from agriculture to agripreneurs. So new models, regional models, local models which are suitable to that region is being taken up. The way ice stupas are being created to save water in Leh Ladakh, can it be created in, let's say, Delhi? No. But can we go for rooftop water harvesting solutions in Delhi? Yes, very much. Can we go for solar panels in Delhi? Yes. And we have to go for resource use efficiency all across the supply chain. And we have to finally achieve this farm to fork. So from farm, I am directly bringing the produce to my plate. That means direct to consumer models, which is applicable these days to companies. Why can't farmers also bring their produce directly to our homes? Then the linkages of industry, academia, agriculture. Why? Because the industry demands are very different. Industry wants good quality of produce. Agricultural institutions are working towards government goals. Academia is working towards the government goals of doubling farmer income. Now, if we go for integration of both these policies, let's say the industry want good produce and academia, they are working on doubling farmer income, then will it not help the farmers naturally? And we have to also link agriculture with industry as well as services. Good example, integration of ITES into agriculture. Use of drones to spray pesticides or just to take drone shots of the entire field. For surveying, use of LiDAR, use of space technology. So, integration of already existing technologies into agriculture to aid the doubling of farmer income. And best example is, let's say I have a land and I go for an app. I open the app. In the app, the app asks for my GPS coordinates, and based upon my GPS coordinates, it works on an AI model to look at the international prices of crops, on the commodities which are traded on MCX and all across the globe. It is looking at crop future prices. Then it is looking at my GPS location, what kind of weather patterns are there in the future, what kind of predictions have come from IMD, then what kind of local buyers and sellers are there of that particular. So even if, let's say, the recommendation is coming tulips, but let's say I am in Jammu and Kashmir and the app tells that there is no clear market buyer or seller of tulips, then I'll be at trouble. So based upon multiple inputs, if the artificial intelligence is giving me 3 to 4 choices and then asking me to pay 100 rupees to go for a soil health card, and if I go for soil health card, it also gives me the inputs that I require, the quality of seeds that I require to get the desired amount of income. So is it not integration of ITES, artificial intelligence, into agriculture, and will it not help the farming community in general, along with our management of resources, where we are going for resource use efficiency, where we are going for more greener methods, we are going for organic farming, we are going for zero budget natural farming, we are using circular economy, where we are using the waste as wealth, the waste as inputs to next batch of crops. Let's understand private equity, and this pertains to GS3 economy. Now, what do we understand by private equity and what is the context? So, in the recent market rally, what has happened is that private equity players and VCs, they have went out of their stocks and they have sold a lot of their shares and their holdings along with the promoters of a lot of companies. So this year, what has happened, that private equity, VC and promoters, they have exited a lot of their positions. That means the stocks that they bought, let's say 7 years, 8 years, the stake they bought in various companies, they have exited a lot of these stocks after the stock market rally recently. In this context, let's understand what is private equity. So there are multiple players in the market. Multiple players. And all of these players will have some amount of money and they can go individually to invest in different companies and let's say buy individual shares of different companies. So let's say you are an investor in the stock market. So what do? You pick up 5 good companies and you invest certain amount of money, let's say in a monthly SIP manner, or you go for one time investment in, let's say, a set of 3 or 4 odd companies. But let's say you're a person who is having 1000 crores. So how would you invest? And who will give you this advice? And what if the money goes wrong? What if the advice is wrong? What if you click a wrong button? So there is a lot of issue whenever you have wealth. And therefore, the high net worth individuals, they would require scientific wealth management. Now, let's take an example. Let's say I am the Canadian Pension Fund and all of you who works in Canada will give me, let's say 10% of their annual salary, or let's say 2% of their annual salary. And over the period of time, I have more than $250 billion of money parked with me. Let's take another example. Let's say I am a sovereign wealth fund and because the oil was trading at $100, so my country earned a lot of premium and all that premium recently came to me, and over the period of time I have accumulated $1000 billion. That means I am at $1 trillion. Now sitting here, the people are looking at news that India is a bright spot. India can be the next China. India will be the 3rd largest economy. They want to invest in India, but they don't know how to invest. So what they will do is they will hire a private equity. Let's take an example now. Let's say we are BlackRock. We are BlackRock. And this sovereign wealth fund of Abu Dhabi or Canadian pension fund, they want to invest in India. They don't know how. So what they will do is both of them will give me $1 billion each. And then let's say Cristiano Ronaldo also wants to invest. And let's say some of our politicians who have gone for round tipping, embezzlement of money, they have parked their money in Swiss accounts. Or let's say there is some offender who has fled the country. Still they want to invest in India. So they are also pulling in $100 million. Let's say $100 million again. So over the period of time, what will BlackRock do? It will have a corpus. Let's say it has created a corpus of $5 billion. It has got from multiple investors. Now, remember the story very clearly. Okay. So now BlackRock is what? It's a firm. It's a company. Now this company will create a private equity fund. Please remember, this is a private equity firm. This is the company which does private equity, and it has created one such fund. Naturally, it can create multiple such funds, one from Brazil, one for China, multiple funds. It can also create a fund for BRICS. So depending upon the investors, how they want to invest, they are feeling something. They have a gut feeling that we want to go into a sector, for example, green energy, and we want to park $1 billion there for the next 10 years. So whom to go, whom to approach? These are the private equity players. Now, so this private equity fund has been created. Let's name this fund. So BlackRock created a BlackRock fund which will be named as Invest Emerging Investment Opportunity Fund, something like that. Now, this fund will start investing in companies in India. So, will SEBI know who all are investing in India? No, because this fund is investing in India, right? So, this is called private equity fund, and the company which is handling all such private equity are called private equity firms. Now, why would I do this? So, let's say I want to buy a share of Zomato. So, I can directly go into the secondary markets, open a demat account and buy a share. But let's say I wanted to get into Zomato before the IPO. Then how would I get it? And I am a high net worth individual. So I have 1,000 crores lying in my bank account. I want to park 200 crores into Zomato because I have some ideas about Zomato. So I'll go to a private equity firm, ask them to create a deal, and I want to invest. Maybe buy some stakes. So going to market, a lot of companies, they would require these funds. Now let's differentiate them from venture capital. Let's seek the answer. What is a venture capital and how private equity is different? So private equity and venture fund, they are types of alternate investment funds. Now in VC, I am asking for, let's say, the seed amount, or let's say the first 2 rounds of funding, so that I can create my startup. But at a certain point of time, let's say now my valuation is $3 billion. That is my total valuation, and I want $1 billion. This $1 billion I want for growth. So maybe these private equity players, they will come. And what is the benefit that these private equity players will get? So usually they will now control the company, and now they can also give directions to the company after they have got the stake. At times private equity players can be as big that they are buying companies after company, or simply they are buying the hive of or one particular sector, one particular company, one particular subsidiary of a large conglomerate. Let's say a company is there which repairs tires, and the entire conglomerate is about steel. So this large company does not feel good about this tire business. So a private equity player might directly buy the company 100%. Now, how do they earn money? So whenever they want to sell their stake, they might sell the entire shares that they have to other private equity players, or they might make money once Zomato goes to IPO. And once there is IPO, they can sell their entire shares, or again they can sell their shares to some other private equity players in a block deal. So all those ways are used to make money, and the private equity becomes an essential fuel. And apart from what? Debt. Let's say I am taking some bank loans. So private equity becomes this essential fuel during times when there is crisis of funding. Let's say VCs are not investing anymore, angel investors have died. At this point of time, private equity players pick up a lot of stakes. At times there is also a criticism that private equity is like vultures, because they go for hounding the smaller companies which are facing some tumultuous times. Now some good examples are Blackstone, KKR, Carlyle Group, Apollo Global Management. So all these companies you must have read all across the newspaper that they are investing in multiple companies, and it comes on a daily basis, and that is why we looked at private equity. Let's look at the fourth article, and this relates to communal slurs being said in the parliament, and because of which privileges committee has come to news. Now let's understand what are privileges. So as an individual I have my rights, but as an individual I have elected my representative. Now so that my representative is able to vote freely and speak freely in the parliament, so that my elected representative is able to express my true concerns or is able to represent all of us in our constituency. So they need some extra rights over the top that other citizens have, and these are called privileges. And these privileges, they are under Article 105 and Article 194. In the last session, we discussed something on the P.V. Narasimha Rao case. There also the issue was on privileges and whether or not there is immunity from criminal prosecution by using the privileges. Now let's understand what are these privileges and what is the privilege committee. So these are parliamentary privileges refer to rights and immunities enjoyed by parliament. So one point that it is for the entire parliament as an institution, and it is also available to a member of parliament as an individual. So that means they can be collective as well as individual. And Article 105 is for parliament, Article 194 for state legislature or the legislative assembly. Now when we are talking about the Lok Sabha, so it is a 15-membered committee and it is nominated by the speaker and headed by the speaker. When we are looking at the Raj Sabha Privileges Committee, then it is a 10-membered committee and all the members are nominated by chairman, headed by deputy chairman. The idea is that they will have the power to examine whether there has been any breach of privilege, whether privilege of individual or collective privilege, and upon the complaint they will give a report and give suitable recommendation. So let's say I as an MP feel that there is some breach of my privilege because of some articles or someone has tarnished my image, then I can very well go to the privileges committee. Or as a collection of a lot of MPs, we feel that statements made by a few of the parliamentarians has hurted my sentiments and my party sentiments, and it has denigrated or degraded the overall value, sanctum of the parliament, which is the temple of democracy. So what I'll do is I'll go to the privileges committee and go for a complaint, and then the privileges committee will look into the facts of the matter, and here the privileges committee acts in a quasi-judicial manner and it will submit its report to the parliament. The next article is from GS2 International Relations. Now over the period of time, evacuation operations have become more frequent and therefore they can become very frequently asked prelim questions. They become very good prelim fodder. So let's look at a list of evacuation operations in recent times. So Operation Kaveri, and we must remember the states from where the evacuation has taken place. So Operation Kaveri from Sudan, then we have Operation Ganga. This is post the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Then Operation Devi Shakti, this was from Kabul, Taliban crisis. Then Vande Bharat 2020, this was COVID-19. Then Operation Samudra Setu, this was again COVID-19 during pandemic, and this was using the sea route, naval route. Then Operation Rahat, this was from Yemen. Operation Maitri, this was following the Nepal earthquakes. Now what you can do is, you can make any such fodder that we have. So such names can be directly. Operation Kaveri is in context of, or Operation Kaveri was an evacuation operation run by the Indian Air Force from which of the following countries? A, B, C, D. So or which of the following statements are correct about Operation Kaveri. So we must look out for all such fodder for our prelims. Thank you so much. I hope it helped.